Assalamu alaikum, my dear friends and fellows. How are you? I welcome you here on my training channel. My name is Abdul Khalik. Dear friends and fellows, the time we have got is very limited indeed. It is just the time of 24 hours a day. We have to do a lot during all that. Have to sleep 7 8 hours of sleep and getting ready, etc. from and to work. So I think the time we have for the work, for the activities is a very limited one. The energy we are possessing is also very limited one. If this be the case, I think that we need to be very careful and cautious. We need to be very careful and cautious about the time we have and the energy we do have and should not be squandering it here and there at all. We must be very careful. Today, we are going to talk about how not to use it, not to worry about certain things which where we should not be spending the time, energy. After a careful consideration and some sort of research, availing the research of others, we have come to a conclusion that there are seven such things where we should not be worrying at all, shouldn't be spending our time at all. What are those seven things? And what is the reason behind? Let's look upon all that, dear friends and fellows. First of all, it is seven areas where you shouldn't spend your time and energy. So, what are those seven areas? First of all, it is committing to unimportant tasks. Committing to unimportant tasks. Now, how to know and understand whether something else we are willing to do, whether it is important or unimportant. Let's look upon these few points. And what are these, by the way? Does this directly contribute to my primary goals and projects? That is what we need to ask. Does this directly contribute to my goals and my projects? If at all it does, then it is important and I shall try to do it. But if at all it doesn't, obviously then I'm not going to spend time upon this. Now the second is, will this matter in 6 months or a year from now? Will this matter in 6 months or a year from now? That is what we need also to think about. Ki will it matter after 6 months or a year? So that is the second thing. And now the third is someone else better, position to handle this task? We need to ask this thing from ourselves, is someone else better positioned to tackle this task? Number four thing, that is, batching, grouping similar tasks and setting specific time to tackle them. Okay, there could be several unimportant things. We can batch together, we can group together, and we can allocate a little bit of the time for the tackling of all these things. Now the fifth is, that is, learn to say no respectfully when non-essential questions come up. When non-essential question does come up, we need to say no, and we need to do it respectfully but firmly. And now the sixth is, ask clarifying questions, unexpected output before committing. Before making any commitment, we need to ask what will be the outcome of this, what will be the outcome of committing to this thing. Now that was the number one thing, committing to an important task. Now the second thing we should not be spending our time and energy upon, that is perfectionism in everyday task. Perfectionism in everyday tasks. We should learn to say no and not to spend the time and energy upon that. Define the minimum viable quality needed for each type of task. Whatever is the minimum viable quality needed, we need to know about this. And then I think we should be content with all that. Next is weigh if extra 10% quality warrants 50% more effect, more effort. That is, we need to ask whether, if at all, do I increase the 10% of the quality, will it increase the results considerably? If not, then I think I don't should not be spending 50% of the extra effort upon that. Rather, we should be content with the 10% lesser quality. And then also we need to remember perfection can be the enemy of good enough. Remember, the perfection can be the enemy of good enough. It is the enemy of good enough. So perfection is the we need to remember that perfection can be the enemy of good enough. Now the third thing where we should not be spending our time, spending our energy upon, that is dwelling on the past mistakes. Yes, we don't need to dwell on the past mistakes. Why? Because it stifles our creativity and we don't want to stifle it. It stifles our productivity. We don't want to stifle it. It and it stifles our motivation. We in the present we don't want to do that. That is the number one thing, that we cannot dwell on the past mistakes. Number two reason is that that is compounds errors by not letting us you know course correct and extract learning. We can't learn from that. We cannot correct it, and we cannot correct in the future. We cannot learn it. If at all we are regretting and repenting so much, if at all we are dwelling on the past mistake, then it anchors our identity and self narrative to these past feelings. It anchors our identity. Yes, we don't want our identity to be anchored to it, and and self narrative to those past mistakes. I think yes, our identity and our self narrative, it should not be anchored with the past mistakes, with the past feelings at all, because that is quite destructive. Now for the fourth reason, write down learning, then consciously let go of residual emotions. We need to keep writing. What did I learn out of that feeling, out of that mistake, out of that loss or trouble? And once we have enlisted it, then we consciously, then we being aware, we need to let go this residual emotion. And now the sixth is, visualize mistakes disappearing to the past as you breathe slowly. We can visualize that these past mistakes are evaporating and disappearing as we breathe slowly. And now the sixth is Seventh is, notice when you meditate and deliberately shift thoughts to the present. Yes, we need to do the meditation, and then we need to deliberately shift our thought to our present, because our present demand and need much much more attention. Because if at all we fail to pay attention to our present, what is going to happen? Again, we will be making much bigger mistakes. Now the next is, that is trying to play in the now the fourth thing where we shouldn't be wasting our time and where we should not be wasting our energy. The fourth such item is trying to please everyone. I think we cannot afford to try to please everyone else at all. Why? Because stretching yourself too thin, trying to accommodate every request. If at all we are trying to accommodate the every request, it actually means that we are stretching ourselves too thin. And now the second is over sensitivity is when some people inevitably don't connect with you. Oversensitivity is when some people inevitably don't connect with you. Then I think that we shouldn't be trying to please everybody else at all. Now molding your views, style, and even identity to avoid rejection. Molding your views, style, and even identity to avoid rejection. I think rejection is not bad at all. Not that bad at all. So why to mold our views? Why to mold our style? Why to mold our identity? Why to avoid the rejection? I think rejection should be accepted and not to do all that. And now the fourth reason is why we shouldn't try to please anyone, everyone. Connect with your core values. We need to connect with our core values, and we need to connect with our goals. Then align actions to them. We need to connect with our core values and our goals, and to then align our actions toward them. So that is, then align actions to them, our core values and our goals. And now the fifth reason why we should not try to please everyone else, that is, recognize you cannot control how others perceive you. Yes, we need to understand that I cannot control how others perceive me. So for that reason, why to worry much about all that? Now the fifth is worrying about things beyond your control. Worrying about things beyond your control. I think that we shouldn't be worrying about the things which are not in my control. Why? Because reshaping worst case scenario, however unlikely, because no as far the worst case scenario is concerned, we need to conceive it, okay, then we need to reshape it, reshaping worst case scenario however unlikely. And then the second thing, why not to worry about the thing beyond my control, and that is letting imagination construct scary scenarios. Letting imagination construct scary scenarios. It is like, we are allowing our imagination to construct a scary scenario. Also, feeling emotionally drained, helpless, and paralyzed. If at all we are, worrying about things beyond your control, we are feeling emotionally drained, and helpless and paralyzed. And then also the fourth reason why we shouldn't be worrying about the things which are beyond my control. Identify of actionable steps can influence the situation. Identify if actionable steps can influence the situation in any way. I need to identify, you need to identify what actionable steps can influence the situation. If yes, if at all we have found some of these, then what we need to do is focus energies there. We need to focus our time and energies over there with with equanimity around elements outside your influence. If at all, with equanimity around elements outside your influence. If at all that there are things which are, outside my control, I need to develop equanimity, mean keeping calm and composure. Keeping calm and composure even in the difficult situations, that is called equanimity. And the identifying if actionable steps can influence the situation in any way. If yes, focus energy is there with equanimity around elements outside your control. And now, dear friends and fellows, now also, also, compartmentalize time for constructive action versus rumination. Instead of ruminating, instead of thinking it about that again and again, it is far better to compartmentalize time for constructive action. Yes, I need to compartmentalize the time for the constructive action instead of ruminating. And now the sixth is practice mindfulness, perspective, and radical acceptance. Practice mindfulness and perspective, and mindfulness, perspective, practice mindfulness, perspective, and radical acceptance. Around as around as outside as around around aspects outside your control. Practice mindfulness, perspective, and radical acceptance around aspects outside your control. Yes, we need to practice the mindfulness. And now, of course, the sixth item where we should not be worrying our time, we shouldn't be spending our time and energies upon, that is engaging in negative self-talk. Why? It cripples motivation and fueling feelings of unworthiness and self-blame. It will, because as far engaging in the negative self-talk is concerned, it cripples motivation by fueling feelings of unworthiness and self blame. That is why it is very important to avoid not to indulge in the negative self talk. Also, because it reinforces false narrative. It will reinforce false narrative that prevent growth, which will prevent my growth, and that will reinforce false narrative. Also, the other reason is that close your eyes to our accomplishment. It actually, as for the negative self talk is concerned, it close our eyes to our accomplishment, our talents and our inner light. It close our eyes towards them. Also, notice when self sabotaging narratives get triggered. We need to notice when the self sabotaging narrative get triggered, as that awareness can disarm the, notice when self sabotaging narrative get triggered, as that awareness can disarm them. Yes, that awareness can disarm them. Also, actively cultivate realistic and compassionate internal dialogue. Actively cultivate realistic and compassionate, realistic and compassionate at the same time internal dialogue aligned with your truth, aligned with your truth, rather than resignedly accepting disparaging narrative. You know, that is aligned with your truth rather than resignedly accepting disparaging narrative. We don't have to accept the disparaging narrative at all. Actively cultivate realistic and compassionate internal dialogue aligned with your truth rather than resignedly accepting disparaging narrative. And now the last is, and the sixth is script affirmative statement. Script affirmative statements about your strengths and capabilities to repeat when old tapes start playing. When the old tapes start playing, what we need to do is script affirmative statements about your strengths and capabilities to repeat when old tapes start playing. So that was the sixth, that was the sixth, that is engaging in the self-negative talk. And now the seventh and the last thing, where we shouldn't be spending, spoiling, and destroying our energy and time at all. That is comparing yourself to others. Why this? Because if we feel behind others, it can diminish our self-worth and motivation. If we feel behind others, it can diminish our self worth and motivation. That is why we shouldn't be comparing yourself to others. And now, the second reason why we shouldn't be comparing ourselves to others, if we feel sick, if we feel superior to others, it can breed toxic ego. If we feel superior to others, it can breed toxic ego and entitlement. And we don't have to cultivate the entitlement or the superior, the toxic ego. Now the next reason, the third reason why we shouldn't be comparing ourselves to others is that is comparing yourself to your past self and use that as a motivation. So this is something really great, comparing yourself to your past self. We need to compare ourselves with our past self and use that as motivation. Yes, of course, we can use that as motivation. And now the fourth is appreciate, appreciating people accomplishment. We need to appreciate the accomplishment of the people without tying it to your worth, without tying it to my worth. I need to appreciate the accomplishment of other people, and you need to do the same. Of course, the fifth reason why we shouldn't be comparing yourself, myself to others, focusing on your fulfillment benchmark. Yes, focus on your fulfillment benchmark, and aligned to your unique talents and situation. Focusing on yourself, on your fulfillment benchmark. So these are my fulfillment benchmark aligned to your style, as unique style, unique talents and situation. So that is all, my dear friends and fellows. Let's have a very, very quick revision, just those 7 points, because it is really important. It is really useful for me and for you and for all the people to understand why we shouldn't be avoid why we must be avoiding these seven things, and unless and until we do that, I think we are going to destroy ourselves, and we do have to protect ourselves from that sort of destruction. The first thing is, committing to unimportant tasks. Yes, we need to avoid it. How to understand whether something is important or unimportant? Does this directly contribute to my primary goals and projects? If not, I should leave it. Then the next is, will this matter in 6 months or a year? If not, then leave it. From now, then the third is, if someone else better position to handle this task, okay, ask somebody do it instead of me. And now the next is, that is batching grouping similar tasks and setting specific time to talk to tackle them. Yes, batching grouping similar tasks, and then familiar tasks, and setting specific time to tackle them. And now the next is, why learn to say no respectfully when non-essential questions pop up. And why the next is, ask clarifying questions on expected output before committing. And now the second thing where we shouldn't be spending much of the time, that is perfectionism in everyday tasks. Define the minimum viable quality needed for each type of task. Number one. Number two, weigh if extra 10% quality warrants 50% more effort. If this be the case, I need to leave it. Now remember, perfection can be the enemy of good enough. Perfection can be the enemy of good enough. Now the third thing where we shouldn't be wasting our time upon, that is, dwelling on past mistakes. I think we shouldn't be dwelling on the past mistake, because it stifles our creativity, and productivity, and even motivation in the present. So we shouldn't be doing that. Now why, compounds errors by not letting letting us course correct and extract learning. So that is why we shouldn't be dwelling on the past mistake. Also, dear friends and fellows, anchors our identity and self narrative to the past feeling. We don't want to anchor our identity. Number four, write down learning, then consciously let go of residual emotions. Yes, the next is, visualize mistakes disappearing disappearing to the past as you breathe slowly. Now the next reason is, notice when you meditate and deliberately shift thoughts to the present. Yes, trying to please everyone. We don't have to try to please everyone else at all, because that is absolutely unaffordable. So that is, trying to please everybody. We shouldn't be spending much of the time and the energy upon it. Stretching yourself too thin, trying to accommodate every request. Over sensitivity is when some people inevitably don't connect with you. And also, molding your views, style, and even identity to avoid rejection. That's why, connect with your core values and goals, and then align to them. And now recognize you cannot control how others perceive you. So for that reason, we don't need to please everyone and everyone else at all. So I think then the next thing is, that is worrying about things beyond your control. We don't need to worry about the things which are beyond my control. Why? Reshaping worst case scenario, however unlikely. Yes, we need to reshape it. Now letting imagination construct a scary scenario, because our imagination will construct a scary scenario if at all we are worrying about the things which are beyond our control. Also feeling emotionally drained, helpless, and paralyzed. We don't want to be feel emotionally drained, helpless, and paralyzed. And identify if actionable steps can influence the situation in any way. Yes, I need to identify if actionable steps can influence the situation in any way. If yes, focus energy is there with equanimity. Equanimity mean calm and composure, especially in the difficult situation and around. That is, that is, identify if actionable steps can influence the situation in any way. If yes, Focus energy is there with equanimity around elements outside your influence. Now, the next why we shouldn't be worrying about the things outside my control. That is compartmentalized time for constructive action versus rumination. Compartmentalized time for constructive action versus rumination. Now, the next is practice mindfulness, perspective, and radical acceptance, around aspects are outside your control. Number six thing where we shouldn't be spending wasting our time and energy upon, that is engaging in that is engaging in negative self talk. It cripples motivation by fueling feelings of unworthiness and self blame. It cripples motivation by fueling feelings of unworthiness and self blame. Now, the next is reinforce false narratives that prevent growth. Reinforce false narratives that prevent growth. Now, the next is close our eyes to our accomplishments, talents, inner light. The next is notice when self-sabotaging narrative get triggered, as that awareness can disarm them. Now actively evaluate realistic and compassionate internal dialogue aligned with your truth rather than resignedly accepting disparaging narrative. And now the next is script affirmative statement about your strength, and capabilities to repeat when old tapes start playing. And now, the seventh and the last thing where we shouldn't be spending much of our time upon comparing yourself to others. If you feel behind others, it can diminish our self worth and motivation. If we feel superior to others, it can breed toxic ego and entitlement. Then third is why we shouldn't compare ourselves. That is comparing yourself to your past self. Comparing yourself to your past self and use that as motivation, it is really great. That is the solution. Comparing yourself to your past self and use that as motivation, that is really great. And now the fourth is that is appreciating people's compliments, appreciating people's accomplishments without tying it to your worth, without tying it to my worth. I need to appreciate people's accomplishment. And now the last reason why I shouldn't compare myself to others is focusing on your fulfillment benchmarks. Focusing on your fulfillment benchmark aligned to your unique talent and situation. Focusing on your fulfillment benchmark aligned to your unique talents and situation. So that's all. These are the seven things I or you should not be wasting, spoiling our time upon it at all. Thank you very much.